on, violence seekers and degenerates? We are here during International Fight Week here for UFC 276. I'm Matt Proto, here with my co-host KevDog, Emperor G, my man who's up plus 20 units right now since we started tracking since, I believe, late April. How you doing, buddy?
Man, living the dream. I know I say this too much, but life is a beautiful thing. You always got to find the positive in the negative, and super thrilled to be back here for another main event. And gosh, we got some bright fireworks ahead of us this weekend.
Yeah, and speaking of positives, like I just said, positive 20 units. My man had another good card last week. We're hoping to keep that one rolling. Coming into this one, what are your thoughts, just as on the card as a whole? Obviously the last pay-per-view was amazing. That one took place over in Singapore with obviously one of the greatest main events of all time, I'd say, especially in the light heavyweight division. How do you think this card stacks up with that one?
Gosh, well, let me tell you, there's just so many fantastic narratives of this card, just to start off with Volkanovski and Adesanya, the fact that, they're in the same realm of training there. Really cool stuff. Of course, you have a veteran, Robbie Lawler, former UFC welterweight champion of the world, fighting. And then you have a guy in, Sean O'Malley, who is really this this type of entertainment that, you don't really come by very often, that type of fan favorite that everybody loves to see. You either love him or you hate him. There's no in between. And, he has an opportunity this weekend that I think will really put him on the map. He's getting a top 10 guy, and, can't wait to see how he handles that pressure.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely good matchups through and through this entire card. I mean, speaking of the Australia-New Zealand ties, I mean, starting it off, Jess Rose Clark, she's from that area. And you got someone in Brad Rydell who's from the area. And then obviously, like you mentioned, Volk and Izzy Adesanya, they're also from Australia, New Zealand. And they just happened to train together recently along with Brad Rydell. So, there's a lot of good things going on in that realm. Just last week, we saw Carlos Ulberg, another guy from over there, got a dominant win in the first round knockout. So, a lot of positive momentum going on for those guys right now heading into this one. And, I think there's definitely a lot of coin flips here, a lot of good odds. I think there's a lot of chances to make money, starting from the early prelims all the way up until the main event. So definitely going to be an exciting card, betting wise, watching wise. Obviously, this one's stacked on paper. It's way more stacked than 275 was. Just got to hope it delivers in similar fashion. So during International Fight Week, you can't ask for a bigger card than this, I don't think.
Yeah, no, absolutely spectacular. And it's like you have these camps that they have so many fighters on this card. I mean, with the Sean O'Malley, Barberena, Cannonier, all coming from MMA Lab, really cool stuff, and man, it's just going to be such a fun, exuberant, card. I mean, Israel Adesanya is arguably the face of the UFC. There's really no ifs, ands, or buts about it, He just brings a type of vibe that, again, is just so rare. And it's amazing because, he came into the UFC not even 5 years ago. Here he is, the face of the UFC. It's just amazing how just in a few years, the divisions can flip and, you have this superstar that comes out of wherever. And again, you have the whole narrative, and I know we'll hop into it on Saturday. But again, we have, the Alex Pereira, coming in and has some history with Israel Adesanya. So, just a lot of really fun narratives about this card. And, I firmly expect violence. I don't think that we're going to see any timid fights on this main card.
Yeah. And, speaking to his superstardom, Izzy Adesanya has an entire fighter riding on his coattails in Alex Pereira, right? That, Izzy's such a big superstar that they bring in the one guy that truly beat him in dominant fashion from his old, sport of kickboxing. So it's almost like that McGregor-esque when he was on his rise to the top. They kept talking about the guy in Cage Warriors who beat him. What if we signed him, made this fight? You could get that loss back from that guy in the regional scene. So it's got a very similar feel to that. Obviously, that fight never played out. And, it just goes to speak at how big of a superstar Israel Adesanya is that, they'll create these storylines from fights that took place many years ago in a completely different sport. I mean, obviously it's combat sports, but, kickboxing, mixed martial arts, two completely different things.
Yeah, and I think the most disappointing thing about this weekend's card is the fact that you got rid of your mustache prematurely. I thought you were growing it out. I look on the camera, it's gone. It's a
bad card. It was bad karma. That mustache, it was like a -3 unit card. That was one of my worst cards in the past.
It's a small sample size. Come on now.
Hey, it's enough to have me get changes. I actually brought a little prop here. I haven't brought these out since the Super Bowl, and we all know what happened in the Super Bowl. Hit that blue Gatorade prop.
Boom. Oof. Okay, you're looking like
Got these
Migos.
bad boys. So I
You're
mean,
looking like
if these
Migos.
things come on during a pick, I'm very confident in that pick and that it's going to come through and hit. So that's my prop for this week, and hopefully it's a positive prop. I can build off that blue Gatorade history that I made
I
before.
love it, man. I love it, man. If you ever do go in the rap game, that'd be a great prop for you to wear in your music videos. No doubt
No
about
doubt. No doubt at all. But what do you say we get into this main card here? I mean, starting us off, speaking of superstars, Sean O'Malley, probably the biggest up-and-comer in the sport right now. I think he's even bigger than Paddy Pimblett. His following is massive. He backs it up in his fight game, knockout after knockout for this guy. Only one loss in the UFC right now, and that's to Chito Vera, who, is in the title eliminator fight, arguably coming up. So, he's going up against a guy here in Pedro Munoz, who's 1-4 in his last 5. He's fought, the best of the best in this division. When you talk about, rise to the top, these two had completely different paths to get here. So it's definitely going to be an interesting fight here. Someone like Pedro Munoz, who, as you can see here, 35 years old. He's been in the game for a long time. Sean O'Malley, only 27. And, he just got himself into the top 15. Let's see what he could do with this opportunity here.
Yeah, no, I mean, let's just put it straight here. I mean, Pedro Munoz has fought so many absolute legends of the sport. I mean, if you just look at his previous few losses, I mean, they're all versus, either current or former champions, right?
Yeah.
So, in regards to the experience in the octagon, obviously you have to give the advantage to Munoz. The amount of durability that he brings to the table is really unmatched. He simply just isn't impossible to get finished. And you look at a guy in Sean O'Malley, which, I came across a statistic last night, which I was actually really baffled by. Sean O'Malley is first in UFC history with 8.37 landed strikes per minute, minimum 5 fights to qualify, for the record. And that's just spectacular. He's striking at well over 60%, which is 4th all time, 62.8%. I mean, that's just like, it's spectacular. And like when you watch him fight, it's just so precise. He has this precision about his hands that, he just connects. He doesn't necessarily have to put out so much volume because he's efficient with his striking and violent with the striking. And, I think this is a really good test for him here. Munoz, I believe, is in the top 10 currently. Probably on his way out at some point. But I don't think that this is a spot where we can just overlook a guy in Munoz, right? I mean, when you fought guys, Dominic Cruz, Aljamain Sterling, Frankie Edgar,
Cody Garbrandt,
Jose Aldo, I mean, the list goes on. You just can't just look at O'Malley's hype train, hammer it, and move on. Now you got to dissect the other side because Munoz, his durability is no joke, and he's going to be here to fight. He even though he's 35 and it may seem like, okay, the wheels may fall off, he's still going to put up a fight 100%.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We spoke about it, briefly yesterday about the durability of these two fighters. And I think, if there's one thing to question about O'Malley, it's that durability factor. And if there's one thing that's unquestionable about Pedro Munoz, it's also the durability, just judging off the guys he's fought, the fashion in which he's fought them. And then, still debated to this day is that Chito versus O'Malley fight where Chito beat him. I mean, constantly, especially this week, it came up time and time again, whether or not, that was an issue with Sean, whether or not it was a lucky shot or if, Chito earned that kick. I mean, I think you definitely have to take, into consideration the damage that a kick like that does land, where his entire leg went limp. And then, something that you notice if you watch his fights, even his last one against Raulian Paiva, every time that leg got touched, it seemed to really bother Sean. I don't know if that's just, if it's a sensitive spot for him, if maybe there was permanent damage done, from that kick, because it was a pretty gruesome looking injury, not being able to put weight on your foot. It just completely goes limp. But for the most part, the nerve endings, they react, they get back together. But, just something seems off with that leg for Sean O'Malley. And I think it's enough for me to question the durability of him as well. And we haven't really seen him get touched up too much. He is very slick defensively. He doesn't necessarily get hit in the head a lot. But, Pedro Munoz, I believe, lands like the second most leg kicks in UFC history at one of the highest rates. And, even against a guy like Dominic Cruz, who's probably the most evasive bantamweight in the world, probably has the best footwork and movement in the division, probably in the UFC. And, Munoz was still able to find his leg kicks. I believe he landed 19 of 26 leg kicks in that last fight. Obviously, he did lose, but he also took some big shots in that one too, and he didn't fall. So O'Malley, not necessarily known as a power puncher. He's just so precise that, he does get guys out of there, which is interesting because I believe he has 11 knockout wins. You can see it right there. And for a guy that doesn't have much power, that's actually pretty crazy. I know it sounds crazy for me to say he doesn't have much power with 11 knockouts, but he's just so good with his hands. He's so precise. And I think it's going to take something powerful to get a guy like Pedro out of there. And, if this one does go to the decision, it probably leans towards Sean just based off the numbers, just raw numbers there, 8 strikes landed per minute. Like you said, defensively, he doesn't get hit much as well. Pedro gets hit more, but I just think Pedro has just been in there with dogs. And the one thing that stood out to me the most about this line is that I believe Pedro is going off at like plus 240 as it stands, plus 245, you'll see. And speaking of the guys he's just fought, he fought, Dom Cruz, Jose Aldo, Frankie Edgar, Aljamain Sterling, Jimmy Rivera, Cody Garbrandt. And you know what? This is the biggest line out of all those fights as an underdog. He fought Aljamain Sterling. He was plus 140. He fought Cody Garbrandt. I believe he was plus 180.
Wow.
He fought all these champions. He was favorited, I believe, against Dom Cruz. I believe he was favored against Jose Aldo. So it just goes to show, how much these books, I think they bake into consideration the popularity of Sean O'Malley and, how many people are going to be running to place tickets on Sean O'Malley in this, how many people are going to put Sean O'Malley in a parlay this week because, he's never let people down before for the most part. And, for the casual bettors, the pay-per-view, they're going to want to get those bets in on Sean. And at this price, I don't think you could justify laying it. I think it's a good enough price for me to want to take a stab at Pedro Munoz here, just based off the murderer's row of fighters that he's already faced. And the fact that they're giving him like a 10 to 12% chance less of winning this one than those fights, I think is a little bit insane.
Yeah, and I don't blame you one bit because at the end of the day, Munoz has that durability factor. So even if you're going to be taking a shot on him here, that he's going to be extremely tough here and he'll be able to endure some adversity. Something that it's really hard for me to get around is, of course, Pedro Munoz has technically lost 4 of his last fights, of course, versus some of the best, but you do have to put that into consideration. And what you also have to mention is out of those 4 losses, he's absorbing an average of 131 strikes per fight, which is pretty significant. And, he's absorbing well over 6 strikes per minute, which is some of the highest in UFC history. So like he is there to be hit. And when you're going against a guy in O'Malley, who literally strikes the most per minute in UFC history, you definitely have to reevaluate and just make sure that this is the right decision. Because I just, I mean, look, O'Malley has a 7-inch reach advantage, 5 inches in height. It's just, when you look at the statistics, right, and I know you're a numbers guy, when you have that significant amount of a reach advantage, I mean, the favor that reach is technically going to be winning well over 70% of the time, probably like 72 to 74. So, it's just something to keep in mind. And you have to consider, okay, does Munoz really have that finishing ability to end this fight? Because if you're going to be on that Munoz side, I mean, hey, like you said, O'Malley hasn't really shown any sort of durability or not that he doesn't have it, but we just haven't seen it yet. And a guy in Munoz who has that calf kick, which I think needs to be there. I mean, you said it best. He's one of the best calf kickers in the game, hands down. And it's just the volume and how much he commits to that move. And a guy in O'Malley, I mean, that has to be there if he wants a chance here. He's got to compromise that leg, which will eventually lower those hands, reduce the speed and all that good jazz. But I mean, the line is way too wide for my liking to hammer an O'Malley money line. It's really interesting because, of course, Munoz has never been finished ever, not only in the UFC, but in the regional scene. And it's like, can O'Malley be that first guy? It's this whole like narrative, like if O'Malley can pull off a KO over a guy in Munoz who has all these fights with never getting finished. I mean, it really puts O'Malley on the map that he's not just some clown with pink hair, So it's going to be a really fun fight. I think it's going to be extremely technical. I do believe it's going to be quite high volume, of course. Maybe the first minute they feel out each other, but it's going to be an absolute war, man. I cannot wait for this fight. You know, I personally think it's a big fight for Munoz here, because like he's lost 4 or 5, of course, versus some of the best. You got to give him that respect, but it's to the point where, does he consider, like, is this what he wants still? Does he still have that hunger? Maybe the last 4 losses have added more steam to the fire, where he's just going to bring something different. I mean, we could see it. If there's a guy that is going to come out here dominant and shut up a big favorite in O'Malley, it could be Munoz. With that experience, with that durability, it'll be an interesting fight. And to kick off this card with O'Malley, it's going to be a fun one, no doubt about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you got to just bank on a guy like that he's seen so much, throughout his career, different guys coming through. The Cody Garbrandt fight, I think, is probably the most similar one to this, just based off, the punching skill, the way they move around the octagon. I know that's a fight that actually Sean's called out for before, but if you remove that Chris Moutinho fight, right, I wonder what the numbers for O'Malley would be for strikes landed per minute, because, he landed 230 strikes in that fight. And then other than that, only in one other fight has he landed north of 100. And, looking at like the Thomas Almeida fight, that one went deep into the third and he had 86 strikes landed. You look at a guy like Munoz, he's landing 100 plus almost every time he goes out there. So the volume, I think, is going to be interesting. I don't think the numbers actually tell the whole story here, just based off, the one outlier of the Chris Moutinho fight, which was, unlike anything we've really ever seen before in the octagon, where it's just a human punching bag for 3 minutes straight. So, I think if Pedro Munoz can, dictate where the fight goes, if he's leading the dance here, if he has Sean on the back foot, that's obviously going to be best for him. Obviously, Sean also, he hits, from any angle. So if he's moving backwards, he can still hit you. So I don't think it is, worst case scenario for him. But I don't think Pedro could win this fight moving backwards.
Yeah, and again, in the guy in Pedro Munoz, if I'm not mistaken, because they're in the bantamweight division, right? It's bantamweight.
Yeah.
Pedro Munoz is technically tied for the most bantamweight fights in UFC history with 17.
That's crazy.
Do you know who he's tied with off the jump, off the top of your head?
Bantamweight? Frankie Edgar?
Close. Uriah Faber.
Okay.
Both with 17. So yeah, man, it's Pedro Munoz is an experienced guy, man. He's no slouch, and it's just one of those things, man. Can O'Malley, put him away? And if he does, man, goddamn, I mean, I can only, like, I'm trying to envision what the UFC will be like if O'Malley does finish Munoz here, because O'Malley already has that persona about him. Fans love him. And if he can do something like that on this caliber of a card versus this type of guy, it'll be time to seriously take O'Malley, legit in this.
Yeah, I think if he wins this one, he doesn't even have to do it in dominant fashion, right? I think he just needs to go out there and get a win over a name like Pedro Munoz, and that automatically propels him into like the top 7, maybe even to the top 5 if he does it dominantly. But I don't think it's end all be all if he loses this one either. I think, like you said, I think Munoz has a lot more to lose in this one. O'Malley just, they just announced that he signed a new deal with the UFC, extending his contract, getting him more money as well. So, you never know how someone's going to react to something like that. I'm not putting too much stock into it. I just want to throw that out there. But
no, that's fair. That's fair, man. Because, you know that you're going to have fighters and just athletes in general, right? That, they favor that financial side more than, that pure legacy side, whether they really want to make a name for themselves and be remembered in the sport. So yeah, no, that's a great point, because we see a lot of times, even in other sports, where, an athlete signs a big contract, their first year in the big contract, they stink. And it's just kind of human nature, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, this is going to be so incredibly fun, and I cannot wait for this fight.
Yeah, I mean, 2 high skill. This is a high level match right here. But might as well move on to this next one with one of the all-time greats here, Robbie Lawler, taking on Brian Barberena. I know Robbie Lawler was upset they actually had him on the prelims here, and then obviously the Miesha Tate Lauren Murphy fight was off, so they moved Robbie Lawler up into the main card, which I think well deserved. The guy's 40 years old. He's fought, at this point, almost 1 million fights in the UFC. He started out in the early 2000s. He went elsewhere, and then he came back into the UFC. And he's been a steady figure here, especially in this welterweight division as of late. And, he's coming off a knockout win against Nick Diaz. Obviously, Nick Diaz didn't look the best, wasn't in the best shape. But, got to give credit where credit's due. Lawler looked great in that fight. And you got Brian Barberena coming off an absolute war of attrition with Matt Brown. I know people were a little upset with that decision going to Barberena. I thought he did enough to win it. So, he's definitely come out here trying to put a statement out, I think, try to ease all the doubters. I know he's excited to go against a legend like Robbie Lawler. And, how couldn't you be, right?
And let's be clear for the record. He didn't knock out Nick Diaz. Nick Diaz quit, So it's like, come on now. But hey, he did drop a round versus Nick Diaz in that fight, which is kind of unfortunate. Man, I mean, how can you not love Robbie Lawler? Like, this is a guy who we grew up watching, and it's just at 40 years old, it's really tough, man. It's really tough. And then you look at a guy in Barberena, he's 33, but I feel like he's a very old 33. Like,
yeah, he is, right? When I saw that he was only 33, I was like, wait a second. I was like, he's only 33.
Yeah. But hey, I mean, Robbie Lawler, man, former welterweight champ. He does have 2 title defenses under his belt, and goddamn, I remember exactly where I was when he fought Rory McDonald. One of the best fights I've ever seen in this division. Just an absolute war. Yeah, it was such an absolute war, man. And Barberena, man, I just, this is a massive, massive fade in general. Just complete. I'm not going to touch this fight. It's just, there's so many different variables in this fight. If these guys fought, let's say 10 times, I feel as though that there might be a different outcome every time. Anyone can win in this fight. Like I for that reason, it's probably just a dog or pass situation. But yeah, no, I mean, Barberena got dropped by Jason Witt. I mean, come on.
He lost that fight too. So
yeah. But mind you, it's like Barberena, I mean, he did technically knock down Vicente Luque. He did technically knock down Leon Edwards. But that was, 3, 4, 5 years ago. Again, I feel as though the aging has been extremely rapid with Barberena. I mean, hats off to him for beating Matt Brown not too long ago. And Barberena has technically won 3 of 4, but he's not fighting no Robbie Lawler. And I don't care if Robbie Lawler is 22, 32, or 42. It's Robbie Lawler, and that he's gonna go head forward. Man, I have this weird feeling, and I'll have to pull up the odds again, but man, I know it's really good odds too, but I have a feeling that this fight's going to end early. I don't know. I just feel like someone's getting clipped. If I'm not mistaken, like this for this fight to go the distance, I think it's like -200, which I think is way whack.
Yesterday it was -175. I'm not sure what it's at today.
Yeah. So I was actually, I haven't placed anything, but I was just looking at the lines. Round 1 is like 4-1 or 5-1. I think that could be live, man. I don't know. I mean, both these guys really have nothing to lose. Both these guys are brawlers. Like they're going to come in here and fight. We're not going to see what was it, a Rogerio de Lima versus your boy Blogoy, whatever, where he's hugging him half the time. No, these guys are gonna stand and bang, and that's the fact of the matter. And when you have a guy that's not only 40 years old, but a guy that's 30, who's he's been knocked out before, he's taken a lot of hits as well. I think that's a really live number to keep an eye on for this to end inside the distance. I understand that Lawler's 40. Like, I understand these guys are kind of getting up there in age, but let's be real, man. I mean, these guys are going to connect at some point. And, at this type of age, you don't necessarily have to connect with the power. It really just takes that one precise shot on a temple or chin or somewhere to wobble and just the opponent go after the kill and it's over. So yeah, I actually like this fight to go inside the distance the more that I talk about it. But to see Robbie Lawler at this age, it's still a beauty. I mean, you just got to appreciate what he's brought to the UFC, even though he's been kind of on the downturn. You still got to respect the greatness, and cannot wait. It's still going to be a banger. It's going to be a banger regardless. So
yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you there. I think that these guys are just going to come out swinging from the jump. I mean, in his last fight versus Matt Brown, Barberena, did the same thing. There was really no games played there. It's just, who's going to win this battle? Just both refused to go down. Matt Brown actually got the better of him early on, really injured him. Looked like he was going to get the finish there for a second and then, gassed himself out. But like I mentioned before, Robbie Lawler, he didn't look like he's lost a step. And, for someone that's 40 years old, that's saying a lot. He still packs a lot of power in his hands. He will have the reach advantage in this, albeit only like an 1.5 inch, 2 inch advantage. But, he comes swinging. I think Barberena is going to respect the fact that Lawler's an OG, that he wants to fight. I don't think he's going to play a smart game plan. I think he's going to give another fight for the fans. And I think that both these guys just come out here looking to headhunt. And when you got with knockout losses of 21 for Barberena out of 29 wins, and then 10 of 17 wins by knockout for Barberena, it's hard to take this one going the distance. I really think that they're going to throw. And if either one gets hurt, I think it's over. I don't think they're going to be able to survive 3 full rounds of violence, especially Robbie Lawler being 40. Barberena, like I said, just coming off that war with Matt Brown not long ago either. And as you said, like plus 130 to get this fight inside the distance, I think is insane value, maybe even under 2.5 at plus 165. I think there's tons of value there when you consider that these guys are both finishers. I mean, 7 of Robbie Lawler's 14 wins in the UFC have been by knockout. And then you look at a guy in Barberena where 4 of his 8 wins in the UFC have been by finish. I mean, he has a submission win there. He's not necessarily known for his grappling, but a guy like Robbie Lawler has shown that, he's susceptible to being submitted. I believe he has 1 submission win and has been submitted 6 times there. But, I think we're definitely in for a good fight. Both these guys are going to come bring it, especially Robbie Lawler, not knowing how many more fights he has left in him. And, if I had to pick a side here, probably lean the Lawler side. I know it's tough to back a 40-year-old with a 7-year disadvantage. I know we both like the youth typically, but it's tough. I mean, when you look at the guys that Lawler's fought recently, right? Obviously I think he's like 1-4 in his last 5, but he beat Nick Diaz. You could say what you want about that. Obviously it's not the same Nick Diaz from, back in the day, the Strikeforce days, but before then he lost to Neil Magny, lost to Colby Covington, lost the controversial one versus Ben Askren, lost to RDA. Before that, he beat Donald Cerrone, and then before that, he was fighting for the belt against Tyron Woodley, where he got knocked out there. So, he's not too far removed from his title reign. That was just 2016. He's only had 6 fights since the last time he fought for a belt. But, I think there's just different levels. I think Robbie Lawler's, proven that he could perform at the highest of levels in the welterweight division. Whether or not he could do it at 40 years old is the question here. So probably not going to put money on him to win this one, but I definitely think I'm going to put some money on this one to finish inside the distance.
Yeah, it's definitely live, man. And, it's like, just think about this for a moment, man. Robbie Lawler made his UFC debut at UFC 37 in 2002.
That's insane.
Like, it's just so miraculous. Like, it's one thing to like, throw a baseball for 20 years, or like throw a football. But like when you are like going into a cage versus a guy who is literally trying to kill you for 20 years, it's just like mind-boggling to me. Like it's really hard. I think for your casual fan, it's like, okay, like, wow. But like when you really like think about it, it's awesome. It's awesome, man.
And not to mention it's at welterweight. It's like probably the toughest, probably welterweight, middleweight, and then light heavyweight, the toughest, to stay in for the longest amount of time. Heavyweight, you could get away with it. Look at like Blagoy Ivanov and some of those older guys there. They could somehow still run it back, Andrei Arlovsky. But, when you're dealing with the speed and the power of these guys down at welterweight, it really is a testament to Robbie Lawler's durability, to his work ethic. The guy just doesn't quit. It doesn't seem like he's just in here for a paycheck either. Obviously 20 years in, you have to really love it to still be doing it. And I think he does.
Yeah, man. I mean, Robbie Lawler is an absolute gamer. And I know we've already said it, but he's going to go down as a Hall of Famer, no doubt about it. I don't know the details of his contract per se, but I mean, you've got to think that if Robbie Lawler comes out here and dominates, Barberena knocks him out, even goes to a decision and wins, it wouldn't surprise me if he takes off the gloves and leaves him in the octagon.
Unless he wants to get to UFC 300.
That would be insanity. Because I know we have a few candidates, with Arlovsky could potentially get there. Would be cool if Lawler does as well. I mean, because off the top of my head, I mean, those two guys are probably the oldest tenured guys in the UFC. Because, I mean, Arlovsky made his debut in like 2001. Maybe even, it may have even been 2000. Yeah, no, it was in 2000. So, yeah, just off the jump. I mean, I think that would be awesome. But, there's got to be a point in time where, Robbie Lawler throws in the towel. His family's telling him, listen, guy, you've lost 5 or 6. Time to hang him up. But, yeah,
I don't think that's Saturday night. I think he gets the win Saturday night, and he's going to be even, as fired up as ever. I think, we're going to see Robbie Lawler at peak form Saturday. Yes. Especially since he's on the main card now. And you're back in front of fans. This guy, legend. I think it's just going to be fireworks from the get-go. And, my pick there, definitely fight does not go the distance, plus 130. I'm going to knock that into a parlay, so I'm ready to go there.
Wonderful, man. That's wonderful. And, we didn't really talk about that too much. I'm glad that we're on that same side there. So may have to throw a unit on the not go the distance after this stream. But without further ado, you want to open us up with this next fight?
Yeah, this next fight, the one we mentioned before, Sean Strickland versus Alex Pereira. Pereira, the guy that knocked out Israel Adesanya, riding on his coattails all the way into the main card here, basically in a title eliminator if he gets the job done. So it's a interesting matchup. I know you and I broke this one down just last night on Twitter Spaces, and we're pretty split on where we think this one goes. I know I mentioned that I was a little bit shocked at where the line sits. I think currently it's at minus 110 on both sides, pretty much a pick 'em. Pereira at one point got up to, I think, minus 120, maybe even minus 125 as the favorite. And, a guy who's only had 6 pro MMA fights, this is his 3rd UFC fight. I'm not crazy about backing someone being a favorite or even a pick 'em against someone in Strickland, who I believe is like 26-3. Professionally, he's 12-3, I think, in the UFC, undefeated in the middleweight division, holds historically good striking defense for the middleweight division, has high volume, and he has the great unknown in his back pocket, which is the wrestling that, I guess we'll see it on full display Saturday night if he wants to get the win. I know he's mentioned it before. He mentioned in the press conference that, the UFC gave Pereira a guy they knew would strike with him in Strickland, thinking that would give him the fastest way to the title shot versus Israel Adesanya so they can make that big payday on that pay-per-view. And Strickland said, maybe I'll just go out there and wrestle. So if he does have the chops to wrestle him, that's what we're going to see. I know we talked about it with Chris Curtis's camp. Strickland trained with Johnny Eblen, the new Bellator champ there, wrestling dominant, trained at American Top Team a little bit. Obviously, he's out of Extreme Couture, right, in Vegas with Eric Nixick as his coach. Definitely comes from a good camp. Pereira obviously trains with Glover Teixeira. But at 34 years old, touch on this last night, I don't know how much you can improve your glaring holes in your game at that age. You definitely learn quicker when you're younger, and you can absorb more. And it's only 3 months removed from his last fight versus Bruno Silva, where we still saw those holes in full display. And we're only 8 months removed from his UFC debut, where he lost a full round on all judges' scorecard to Andreas Michelitis, who, is not in the UFC anymore. So I think it's just a little bit too fast track for Pereira here, where the line sits. I'm obviously on Sean Strickland. I mentioned this on the Spaces yesterday. I think Sean Strickland has a path to victory, whether it be submission or decision, if he can control Pereira for the entire time. The big question is, if he gets Pereira down, can he control him? Because, aside from that first round in the UFC, he's shown that when he's taken down, he can get back up. And other than the Uriah Hall fight, where Strickland had, I believe, 7 minutes of control on 4 takedowns, we haven't really seen that side of his game come out. I think he's been working on it. I think he can utilize it. It's just a matter of if not, he can hold him down there. But, I mentioned this last night as well. On the feet, I don't think Strickland's a huge liability on the feet. I mean, Pereira just fought Bruno Silva, wasn't able to get him out of there. Strickland, he trains hard every day, which could bite him in the ass here, because he does get hit on the regular. It's not just on fight day. He trains, how he fights. So if he took damage in his sparring sessions and throughout his camp, which he had to of the way he trains, then, it might just take one punch from Pereira to get him out of there. So I'm just kind of banking on that one punch not to land. And if it does, I hope he's tough enough to survive it and then shoot a double leg.
Yeah, I mean, let's be real. Pereira is going to get taken down in this fight. There's no doubt about it. I don't think that's really the question. The question is, can Strickland hold him there? Can he control this fight on the ground? Can he take Pereira off the feet and keep him there? Which is a big if, because there's no doubt that Pereira not only has, probably the speed advantage on the feet, but he's more powerful. He's got the strength. And I personally think that he has the hunger advantage as well here. I love Sean Strickland, man. I mean, don't get me wrong. He's a gamer. He brings the entertainment. He's not a bona fide knockout artist, but that when Sean Strickland is fighting, it's going to be fire. like all of the numbers, all the analytics, everything is pointing. This is a auto bet for Strickland here, right? I mean, you're getting Strickland at plus money versus a guy who has 6 mixed martial arts fight in his career, 34 years old. How much can he really grow since he first came into the UFC versus a guy in Strickland who's fought some of the best, you know, right on the cusp of course, getting a shot at the title. So I have so much respect for Strickland, man. And it's just it's really hard for me to get around the fact that Pereira is just of course he is just so incredibly powerful. He has this whole narrative with Izzy. But then on the flip coin, it's like Strickland has such great defense on the feet. You know, I think he stays very clear of those big shots. He's very calculated, you know, I think he's very smart for what you may expect from the interviews. It's just tough, man. You know, you look at a guy in Pereira, his last time when he fought Bruno Silva, mind you, Bruno Silva had like 27 or 28 UFC fight or mixed martial arts fights on his record. So he wasn't fighting no guy that, you know, just, you know, has 10, 15 fights. I mean, he was fighting a guy who has just as many fights as Strickland. You know, I'm not saying that Bruno Silva is Sean Strickland, but I'm saying that, you know, when he was put into an octagon with someone that was experienced, you know, he handled himself just fine. So it's just so tough, man, because goddamn, I mean, Pereira, he's so accurate with his striking. He's so like when he lands, he's going to land. And, you know, I think that if Pereira really wants to, you know, make an impact here, he's going to have to attack the body. You know, I think Strickland is again, he's very good just defending that head, right? The head movement, keeping his hands up for the most part, and evading those strikes. But, you know, and a guy in Pereira who is capable of landing that massive body shot to the liver, you know, punches to the body. I mean, that's really what Pereira is going to have to utilize if he wants to pick apart Strickland here. I mean, Strickland has the clear path here. You know, you got to wrestle him, and then you just got to keep him down. And that's just going to be the name of the game. You know, I firmly believe, I know everyone's saying, and I agree, Strickland has very strict, crisp boxing, right? But, you know, I just feel as though if Strickland really wants to stay on the feet for 15 minutes, like I get the narrative, like he's great with his hands, I just feel like if you're giving him 15 whole minutes, if you're giving Pereira 15 whole minutes on the feet, it's just a matter of time. Like it's just a gut feeling, but it's like at these odds, it's like, God, it's wild that Pereira is a favorite here. You know, my gut is telling me Pereira. I love Strickland, and I know that he's going to have a great game plan here. But like I said, man, I'm just relying on Pereira to just find that mark. And there's a guy that's going to do it. It's going to be him. So yeah, it's going to be so fun. Like literally all these fights are going to be ecstatic, even a 40-year-old Robbie Lawler. But man, this is going to be a very, very fun fight. I think this fight particularly is dividing a lot of just MMA world in particular in regards to choosing a side. Like I think it's very 50-50 here.
Well, yeah, that's how you know they have an efficient line out there, right? They have a line set literally as a coin flip, and you have about 50% of the people on each side. So, you know, I think I don't want to say they got the line right because I think that they got it wrong. I think Sean Strickland should be like no lower than minus 135 in this matchup, maybe even like minus 150. Yeah. I think they're just a little bit nervous of people grabbing plus money on Alex Pereira. So that kind of explains why it's minus on both sides here. And, you know, obviously the cards are stacked up against Strickland. He knows that the UFC is making this fight for an eventual title fight with Alex Pereira and Israel Adesanya. And, you know, for his game plan to work, he's got to close the distance, and he's at a 3-inch height disadvantage. He has a 3-inch reach disadvantage. And, you know, Pereira's got really good kicks, and the way to keep your separation from a guy like Strickland, he's going to have to utilize those kicks, whether it be low kicks, high kicks, body kicks, like you mentioned, if he has to work the body there. So it's going to be interesting to see how Strickland can close that distance because he's not a kicker himself. I mean, he does have some kicks in his arsenal, doesn't necessarily use them too much. So it's going to be interesting because when you're at those kinds of size disadvantages and you have to close the distance, you know, you're leaving yourself susceptible to something, right? Whether it be that flying knee like Pereira landed versus Andreas Michelitis, or whether it be a high kick or, you know, anything, even an elbow coming in, an uppercut. There's just a lot of different tools that Pereira has, you know, at his side to finish this fight. So there definitely is, you know, like I said, I could see Pereira winning the fight, you know, just at -110 on a guy like Strickland that's fought 15 times in the UFC at the highest of levels too. I mean, fighting Jack Hermanson, Brendan Allen, Uriah Hall, like these are no slouches. These are guys that are established in the division. And I know you mentioned Bruno Silva had like 28 fights or so, but only 3 of which were in the UFC. So you can't put too much stock into that. Obviously, he's got power in his own right. Majority of his wins are by knockout. But when we're talking about Strickland, we're not talking about a guy that's really going to go out there and knock you out for the most part. He wants to get into your face and just wear you down with his activity. He's going to use his cardio as a weapon. I'm sure of it. A guy like Alex Pereira, we're not totally sure about his gas tank. We've seen him, slow down a little bit later on in his fights. The only problem is there hasn't been many fights to look at, right? So, I think if Sean could weaponize his cardio, if he could mix in the takedowns, if he could even land on the feet, just gain a little bit of respect from Pereira, I think that'll go a very long way because you already know Strickland's going to respect Pereira from the jump. I don't think he's going to play any games with his power. And, when we see it all the time, when you're so scared of one of your opponent's, tools or strikes, it could, inhibit your entire performance. Mostly we see it with wrestlers, going against wrestlers. But, when you're going against a guy like Pereira, he's got the great neutralizer. We talk about it all the time. He has a death touch. Someone like Francis Ngannou, it's just so hard to bet against him because he could lose the fight for 14 minutes and still win. So it's crazy when you're going against a guy like that. I think either side you bet, it's going to be a sweaty one. So yeah, buckle up, bring a change of t-shirt, bring a change of underwear if you're going to bet this one because you're going to be sweating right through it all.
Yeah, and don't forget the popcorn either. I mean, Strickland, man, he's 12-3 in the UFC. And like I was telling you this on the spaces, man, if you're talking about a UFC fighter coming in and even if they make it to 15 fights, I mean, how many of them are not only making it to 15 fights, but winning 12 of those 15? And like I said last night, it's probably like a 10 percentile. I mean, the guy, he wins at the highest level versus guys that are, like we said last night, it's not, that top tier talent, but it's right on the cusp of that top tier. And this isn't going to be an easy walk for Pereira here. Mind you, would it surprise me if 1 minute, 30 seconds into the first round, Strickland's flatlined on the mat?
No, not at all. That's the beauty of the sport. And I touched on this last night too. I think that there's a lot of value in the over 1.5 here if you want to play an alternate line. It's at -175 on DraftKings. And, we mentioned it last night about Strickland. If he's able to get that takedown early while they're still dry, while they're not sweaty, get him down, hold him down for a little bit, that clock is just going to wind down. And on the flip side, if he's standing with them, he's not going to be getting himself into the firefight, or at least you hope he wouldn't, right? Because that'd be very stupid to do against a guy like Pereira. But, I think that there's definitely an avenue for both these guys to get the over at 1.5 there. I think it's pretty low. A lot of people are expecting this one to be a quick one. I mean, the fight doesn't go the distance. Line is sitting at -190, which I think is pretty high for someone like Strickland, who time and time again, we see his fights go to decision. We just saw back-to-back 5-round fights of his go to decision. So, I think there's value in all the overs in this one. A lot of people are putting a lot of stock into the Pereira knockout. Can Pereira win a decision? Maybe, if he's able to stuff takedowns and just land a few good strikes. We see how judges are scoring rounds now. The control isn't what it's all about. So if Sean's getting that clinch time against the fence, but he's not landing on the feet, those rounds could go to Pereira. And, if Sean's going to win, obviously it's most likely by decision. That's his most popular way of winning fights, especially as of late. And like I said yesterday, I think there's room for a Strickland by submission prop at +1,000, being that he has, I believe, 4 rear naked chokes on his resume. His UFC debut was won by a rear naked choke. The only loss on Pereira's pro MMA record was a rear naked choke in his debut. So, he's only 6 fights removed from that one. I think that there's a possibility Sean gets the takedown. Pereira kind of gives up his back to get up, knowing that he's stronger than Sean. And then maybe Sean could pull something slick because he is a legit brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And not a lot of people know that. Not a lot of people talk about it because he doesn't tend to use his grappling. But from everyone that I've heard from that trains with Sean, that coaches Sean, that's been around him, they all say that his grappling is, very, very high level. So it'll be interesting to see that on display. But I do like the over here. I think that Sean Strickland's game plan is going to, tend to favor the over if he's able to implement it. And if I like Sean Strickland, I think, by rule, I have to like the over as well.
Yeah. I mean, God, I know you keep talking about that submission, man. The more I think about it, I'm like, damn, I know Pereira's getting taken down in this fight. There's just no chance that he's going to stuff every single takedown, right? And we've seen the style of how he gets up It's not like a progression. It's more like I'm just gonna risk that you can maybe take my back and I'm gonna explode up. And a guy in Strickland, man, you know what I'm saying? I mean, he might be able to sneak in the choke there on the way up. I mean, you just never know. Anything can happen. And I was watching the press conferences this morning, and Strickland, man, it seems like he's just got this chip on his shoulder, man. Like the UFC is just kind of thinking that he's just there to get finished or there to just kind of be a stepping stone for Pereira. And I just think, man, you can tell he's got that fire in his eyes, man. He's gonna come out here to fight, and it's really weird because I personally believe that a Strickland submission is more probable than a submission than a knockout. And the odds aren't indicating that. And the reason I say that is because Pereira in the Bruno Silva fight. I mean, Bruno Silva is very powerful. Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, he landed some power shots that I don't think Strickland has that type of power. But I mean, Pereira was eating that and, continuing to remain composed and came out with a win. So, when it comes to Strickland's finishing ability in this spot, I don't think he's going to knock out Pereira. I just think Pereira is just so elusive, moving at different angles. I mean, unless he literally moves into a Strickland jab or like a hook or something, I don't see him getting knocked out here. But like we said, we know that Pereira is most likely getting taken down in this spot. And, the submission is most definitely going to be live here. I think that, again, Strickland is here to make a statement that you guys did me wrong. And you made a bad decision because, man, the fact that this man Pereira is only 6-1 mixed martial arts or 5-1, and he's already at this spot in the sport. It's miraculous because at the end of the day, the kickboxing realm is not the mixed martial arts realm. It's two very completely different sports. But you do have to respect the fact that Pereira knocked out Israel Adesanya on the kickboxing.
Of course, yeah. And to your point about Sean probably looking pissed off or confident, whatever you may have it. I mean, how could you not feel like a sacrificial lamb in this sort of predicament, right? I mean, all the cards are stacked against you. Someone like Strickland, it's obvious his whole life that's been the case that people counted him out. He's obviously pissed off at the world for something, and I just like him. And it's similar, like you said. The submission, I think, is way more likely than a knockout here. And where the knockout stands, it's plus 330 with the submission at plus 1,000. And I have to revert back to the Chris Curtis fight last week when I sent in the Discord how, it was plus 100 for Chris Curtis to get a knockout. And it was plus 1,000 for him to get a decision victory. And I'm like, these are his only two paths to victory, right? And, based off percentages, they're telling us that, he's 5 times more likely to land a knockout than decision. That's just not the case, right? Mm-hmm. And then this scenario here, plus 330 versus plus 1,000, that's about 4 times the difference, 3 times the difference between, a knockout and a submission. I think that obviously there's going to be way more value in that submission there. And then if you think that submission and decision are his only 2 paths to victory here, there's a line at plus 180 to get Sean Strickland. So you get a lot more juice than the minus 110 coin flip that you're currently getting offered. So I think that if you want to take Sean Strickland by submission or decision plus 180, you could find a bet on the other side of Pereira to get plus money as well and just collect the juice in between. I think that there's a way to middle this fight so you get paid regardless, regardless of the outcome. Because I struggle to see the Strickland knockout coming through. Pereira, he's built like a truck. We haven't seen him get knocked out. And, if he does find the win, I think that really the only 2 options are submission or decision. And then on the flip side, you could get Pereira. You could even take him at minus 110, or if they offer the knockout or decision prop at even money, you could even take that and just collect whatever the difference is. So I think that's a way you can play this fight if you want to enjoy it, have a little bit of skin in the game, but not sweat through your t-shirt like I was just referencing before.
100%, man. It's going to be fireworks. Such an even fight, man. I mean, anything can really happen here. Again, we could see a Strickland surprise submission. We could see a Strickland flatlined in the first round. I mean, like I said with one of the earlier fights, I mean, if these guys fight 10 times, it seems like there's going to be a different outcome every time, and gosh, let the best man win. Yeah.
Absolutely. And, before we move on to this co-main, and the main event. You know, I just want to shout out KOD Media and all the new shows they got going on. My guy Jigga on the back of the scenes, always putting in the work, giving us the best quality content. So check out this new stuff.
Man, there. Ooh, we got the rock star out. Okay.
You gotta get on for this co-main, baby, between Alex Volkanovski versus Max Holloway, the trilogy fight where Volkanovski fights 1 and 2. It's very rare that you see the trilogies happen when the first two were decided on the same side, but I believe this is the third occurrence of this happening where you have a trilogy, and I believe in both other cases the same fighter won the third fight. And Alex Volkanovski, I believe, right now, I think the line moved up to around minus 195 last time I saw it, if I'm not mistaken. And the comeback on Max Holloway is probably sitting around plus 165, right? So it's, decent odds. Smaller odds in the last fight, believe it or not. I believe Alex Volkanovski in the last fight was minus 240. So you're actually getting a discount on him here, even though he won that split decision.
Yeah. And let's just be real here, man. I mean, Max Holloway, this man's a dog. I mean, he won 13 straight in the UFC, former featherweight champion of the world, dethroned Jose Aldo, who's considered one of the best in the division of all time. I mean, I have so much respect, so much admiration for Max Holloway. Listen to this statistic, right? In the UFC, Max Holloway has landed 2,848 significant strikes. 2,800, right? Second place, 1,799 by Frankie Edgar. I mean, like, blown out of the water. Like, you just think about that for a second. That's miraculous. Max Holloway does have the 6th most octagon time of all time out of any fighter in the UFC history. If this goes 25 minutes, that will put him in second place, where he's currently at 6. Just to put things into perspective of, how much time he's been in the octagon for this promotion. But man, where do I start? Holloway, man, he has endured so much damage over the years. I mean, he's God, it's just in a sense, it's somewhat hard to see. Just seeing the amount of strikes that he's taken, the amount of wars he's been in. Don't get me wrong, I have the utmost respect for this man, but there has to be a point, from a scar tissue standpoint, from a mental standpoint. I mean, physiologically, where the wheels are just going to fall off. Do I think it could be here? Maybe. I look at a guy in Alexander Volkanovski, man. We've never truly seen a competitor like this, in my opinion, ever. The way he brings this type of intensity, the way his face quite literally turns purple in the middle of a fight because he's just so game. He's just so dominant. Like, the way I think of him is just like a hammer, like just hammering a nail. Like, he is just on point whenever you see him. And it's like, in the fights that we've seen him in the UFC, he dominates. He's not like taking like massive shots. I mean, yeah, he's been compromised certain times and gotten out of very tricky submissions and all that. But when you're talking about when the belt ends and you look at this man, usually he's not all busted up, usually. And I just know that Volkanovski is continuing to evolve. You know, although he's in his early 30s, 33, I believe, 32, 33.
33, yeah.
33. You know, he's still at a point where I believe he is still getting better, which is like very scary, because we've just seen just absolute masterclass performances. Man, I just I see the previous two fights. You know, I think Volkanovski did win both of them, and I just think to myself, what is Holloway going to do different this time around? We know what we're going to get out of Holloway. Like, I know when he's on the pedestal, he says like, yeah, I'm getting better, I'm evolving. And I'm sure he is, but it's like, are we going to see something different? And to bet against the guy in Volkanovski, man, I just, it's a tough ask. And, you know, although Holloway is impossible to put away, he's so incredibly durable. You know, it's really hard to ignore a late finish by Volkanovski here at these type of odds. You know, just to put this out there, Volkanovski to finish in round 3, 18-1, round 4, 22-1, round 5, 28-1. I mean, come on. Like, if we're talking those type of odds, you're basically telling me that the outcome for that to happen is well under 5 to 7% of the time. And let's be real here. If these guys fought 100 times, Volkanovski is knocking out Holloway more than 7 times. I'm sorry. Like that's just like what I think, I know, I feel. And I feel like this is a spot where we could really hit a jackpot here. I think the odds for Volkanovski to finish in a late round is egregiously off. Egregiously off. Like the 18-1 third round should really be like 8-1, maybe 10-1. You give me 18-1 to finish in round 3. I'm willing to sweat those first 10 minutes. And I just feel like this could be the jackpot, man. I really do. Volkanovski is just such a hammer. I love the guy. I know you love the guy. We love the guy. We both respect the fuck out of Holloway, excuse my French. But this is Volkanovski time, man. And there has to be a point where we all have to understand Holloway is living in Volkanovski's world. Like Volkanovski, This is his division. He is Alexander the Great for a reason. And I just don't foresee Holloway winning here. What are your thoughts, Matt? Where's your head at? What are you thinking? What's going down?
So I'm like very happy to see Volkanovski finally getting the respect he deserves. And it seems like it's been a long time coming. They've been downing him, especially after their last fight with Max. You know, still rumors about maybe he's not all that good. Fights Brian Ortega, you know, the noise kind of quiets down a little bit, especially how he got out of that submission, both submissions actually. And, you know, just basically dominated that fight, right, against Brian Ortega. And comes out the next fight against Korean Zombie, and from start to finish just looked like he was on another level. I get Korean Zombie's a top 5 guy, but clearly not what he used to be. I think Max definitely possesses a way bigger challenge than either of his last 2 opponents did. And you have to kind of consider, you know, looking at this from both sides, right? I mean, Volkanovski pissed. Like you can still see, like, he's pissed at Max Holloway. His whole team, like, doesn't like Max Holloway, doesn't like Max Holloway's team. Like, there's definitely real animosity there. And you have to wonder how much of it stems from, you know, that Holloway's the reason why people doubt Volkanovski's greatness so much, and that the fact that people still argue that Max won the last fight, even though it's all said and done, you know that bothers Volkanovski. You know the competitor he is. He is just out of his mind. He really is. You have to be that good at what you do. And you know, Volk really, he just wants to win more than anything. Like, it's almost like he refuses to lose. And he's actually, you know, 21 fight win streak coming into this one, 11 fight win streak in the UFC. So I think there actually is like an edge to this fight where, you know, Volk is like, I need to get to 12 wins and beat Max Holloway more than to just get, you know, the 3 wins over Max, but, you know, get to 12 fight win streak. Max holds the 13 fight win streak. I believe it's is it a record in the division, right?
In the division, correct. Yeah. Yep. And he also has the most wins in featherweight history with 18.
Yeah, so Volk is chasing that, right? So if he wins this fight, this puts him at 12. Max, I believe, was at 13, and it immediately gets Volk into that GOAT conversation, right? If he wins this fight, doesn't even have to be dominant. He can win another split decision, as long as the judges say that Volk is the winner, and still, then that's going to build his legacy even more. You hear the term legacy fight getting thrown around all week when it comes to this fight, because both guys truly are fighting for their legacy, because you have someone in Max Holloway, just mentioned it, all-time featherweight win streak, most wins in the featherweight division, former champ, title defenses, and if he loses this fight, basically all that gets eliminated, because he lost to the same guy 3 times in a row. Gives you that Colby Covington, Kamaru Usman feel where, if this guy Alex Volkanovski didn't exist, Max Holloway's the greatest featherweight in the world, greatest featherweight of all time. And I think that there's it's such a tough test going against Volkanovski, right? Based on his fighting style, he's so smart. I think more than anything, he's so smart, and he is like a very technically savvy fighter where he's reading what his opponent does and he's making his opponent react to what he does. And it's just like a beautiful thing to watch. It's really poetry in motion, because, Volk will get Max to, close the distance, get in, and then all of a sudden he'll switch angles. He'll hit him with a takedown. Maybe he'll hit him with a leg kick from in close. Like, he has so many tools at his disposal. And, Max, if he wants success in this fight, he needs to fight, his fight. He can't fight Alex's fight. We've seen it happen the past 2 times out. In the first fight, there were no takedowns thrown. In the second fight, Volk comes out, he lands 3 takedowns. Probably the difference maker in that fight were those takedowns. So Max definitely going to be more well prepared for those takedowns, I think, this time around. We still don't know what injury he had that he pulled out with the fight in April was. So it's interesting to see, whatever that injury was, if we ever find out how it affects his performance on Saturday night. But I just think it's tough to go against a guy in Volk here. And as you know, I'm a numbers guy. Being minus 240 in the last fight, a fight that he won, and now you're coming off, you're getting him at a discount. He beat a guy decisively in Korean Zombie. He beat a guy decisively in Brian Ortega, where we've seen improvements and, leaps in his game in those last 2 fights, and you're getting the discount. And someone like Max, he beat Yair Rodriguez, but at what cost, right? Like, the damage toll that added up. He wasn't even allowed to do post-fight press conferences. They sent him right to the hospital right after that.
Yeah.
And, the fight with Calvin Kattar, too, he took a lot of shots in that fight, too. He did land like 400 punches, which is absolutely insane. But, he got hit in that fight, too. So, like you said before, damage adds up. You're only invincible for so long. If Volk, can get that shot, if Max comes in close, I think Volk can, he has plenty of power. It's a big guy that's moved down to 145. He used to be like 230 pounds. So, the power is there, similar to Jared Cannonier. But, very, very interesting fight. I mean, where the lines currently sit, Volk by decision is at even money. Obviously, that's the most likely outcome, I think, on either side. But, by the knockout, plus 350, a lot of value there. I mean, 4 of his 11 wins in the UFC are by knockout. Obviously, Holloway has not been knocked out before. At least I don't think so, right?
Holloway? No, I don't think he's ever.
He's never been knocked out. No. And on the flip side, you have Max Holloway. He has 11 of his 19 UFC wins are by finish, right? So, both these guys have the ability to finish. They haven't done it, recently for the most part. I mean, obviously, Volkanovski got the knockout in his last fight. Max, for the most part, hasn't been hunting the finishes, but you have to imagine in this fight coming up, both guys want to put a statement on this one. They don't want to leave it, especially Max doesn't want to leave this one in the hands of the judges. They have 5 rounds to go after it. When you consider the volume that both throw, that they're game fighters, they're willing to fight. A finish on either side, I think, is pretty game, right? And as it stands, plus 180 for there to be a finish inside the distance. I think that's plenty of value here. Obviously, both their fights prior have gone to decision, but I believe we saw it in who was it? Frankie Edgar and his trilogies. I forget which one it was. Maybe it was I don't even want to say because it's hard to be so wrong. But it was decision the first 2 fights, and then the third fight ended by finish. So, obviously small sample side, but history is on our side there for a finish. I think that both these guys obviously have the ability, and, the line's going to be pretty close.
Yeah, no, 100%. And man, I think about the fight between Volk and Korean Zombie last time out, and it's just God, I just see such a similar like scenario here. Like I feel like if Volkanovski does finish him late, doesn't even have to put him out cold. Like with the amount of damage that Holloway has taken, I'm sure that he's endured an orbital fracture at some point in time. Of course, all of the scar tissue and bleeding and all that jazz. Man, it really only takes just like a massive cut, like late, or a way where his eye is just swollen shut, where he can't continue. I mean, these are all real possibilities here. Like Max Holloway simply just can't be put out, and his durability, the way he's able to take the pain and give it back, is very, very impressive. But man, it's just Volkanovski, man, Alexander the Great. It's like just a different animal. Gosh, I just and personally, man, I know we've talked about the odds in the previous fights, but the fact that this line opened, what was it, minus 180? Technically, it opened, or was it a little less?
Yeah, minus 180.
Minus 180. I don't really understand that. I mean, I guess that line is indicating like, okay, maybe Holloway won the previous fight or whatever, but like that should have nothing to do with where we stand in 2022. And quite frankly, the time between their last fight, again, Holloway has been in some absolute wars, and God, you got to put it into consideration here.
Yeah, so. Definitely. And I mean, I don't really have anything else to add to this one. So if you're ready to move on to this main event here, we have Israel's last style bender, Adesanya, going against Jared Cannonier. Finally some fresh blood for Israel Adesanya. He's used the term tons of times. Israel Adesanya, 32 years of age. Jared Cannonier, ripe old age of 38. And, he's finally getting his title shot after moving down 3 divisions, found his home at middleweight. And, he's a force to be reckoned with there. 10 of his 15 wins by knockout. And he doesn't want this one to go to the judges. And Israel Adesanya, we've seen he wanted previous fights to go to the judges. He's played it safe, but all week long we've been hearing that he wants a dominant finish. He wants to get the knockout or the submission. And I think that it's a tailor-made matchup for Izzy.
Yeah. I mean, when you have a guy who, fought in the heavyweight division, drops down to the light heavyweight division, then drops down to the middleweight division, you've got to understand that a guy of this type has significant power, right? Like if he's knocking out heavyweights and he's down at, was it 185, right? Yeah. It's something to consider, right? But like we're talking about a fighter in Israel Adesanya who has some of the best feint game, evading those strikes, staying elusive, athletic, and Izzy's going to have the speed, and it's not even going to be remotely close. Izzy's going to have a significant speed advantage. I think he's going to have way more output on the feet. It's really hard for me to imagine Cannonier finding the mark here, man. I mean, I respect the heck out of him. I mean, he's at this point in his career, at the pinnacle, and he's got his shot that he's been, working for his entire life. But there's levels to this, man. I mean, let's be real. There's levels to this. And is Cannonier the guy to dethrone Adesanya? I just don't think so, man. I have the respect for Cannonier, man. I really do. You got to respect the power, what he brings to the table. But Adesanya, we talked about this before, Matt. Adesanya just has this persona, this aura about him where he stays so fundamentally sound, so spiritually sound, where he is just so conscious of the moment. And it's just, he's the face of the UFC right now. Like there just isn't a guy, you know what I'm saying? I mean, you look at all the champions, Adesanya is that guy of this era. And, I just, I do wonder Cannonier's output. I do wonder if it does go to a later round, if he's even able to keep up with Izzy. I mean, we know Izzy's going to bring it from bell to bell. His striking is just so diverse. Adesanya brings so many different tools to the table. And, you know, like you said, Matt, I think Adesanya still is here to make a statement. Like, I feel as though he hasn't truly earned the respect that he deserves. And, you know, I think I mentioned this the other day. It's like 2 years from now, we're going to look back at this fight and be like, dang, that knockout of Adesanya or submission was
I hope
absolutely
so.
dirty.
I hope so.
You know, I think Adesanya inside the distance is definitely viable here. You know, he has so many different aspects to his game. He's still getting better. You know, he still has this persona about him where he just lives, eats, and breathes this sport. And the killer gorilla, man. I just he's stepping in the cage with a lion, and you put a gorilla and a lion in the cage. Usually, the lion's going to come out on top. So it's going to be fun. I think that there's definitely going to be action. I don't think Izzy's going to take a passive approach here. I think that he's going to, and you know, yeah, I mean, Cannonier's going to go for it, and Izzy's going to have him on the counter. It's that simple.
Well, I mean, Cannonier has to go for it, right? I mean, he mentioned it earlier. I saw in an interview that he said he wants to fight a technical fight. And I said this to you, and I was scratching my head. I was like, you have to be an idiot to go into a striking battle with Israel Adesanya and say you want to fight a technical fight. You know, obviously it could just be hearsay. Maybe he doesn't mean it. He could just be speaking. But, you know, he needs to make this one a brawl if he wants any chance. He's not going to stand on the outside and pick apart Israel Adesanya. It just doesn't happen. It's never happened. And, you know, Israel Adesanya is working with a 5-inch height and a 3-inch reach advantage here. I mean, this guy is like John Jones build, you know, for the division. It's just impossible to get to someone with that kind of physique and with that kind of striking capability. I mean, Israel could take this fight wherever he wants. He could be in close, land sharp elbows and knees. He could be from far on the outside, you know, just touching up Jared Cannonier at the end of his punches with kicks. He could utilize his leg kicks. I mean, I think the two fights that are going to be most similar to look at for this matchup would be that Paulo Costa fight and the Kelvin Gastelum fight with Izzy. Because, you know, just the styles just match up a little bit more, you know, in tune with what Cannonier tries to do. And I know in his last 3 fights, Izzy, he's been taken down 3+ times in each fight. But, you know, Cannonier is not known for his wrestling. You can't just learn to wrestle at 38 years old. And against someone like Izzy, who's shown such vast improvements in his grappling, in his takedown defense, you know, I don't see that being an angle here. What I do think Cannonier has to do is similar to the clip you could just see right in the right side is he needs to attack the legs of Israel Adesanya. I know it's way harder said, way easier done than it is said, but, you know, he did land a lot of leg kicks versus Robert Whittaker, versus Kelvin Gastelum, and versus Anderson Silva, which obviously injured Anderson Silva's knee. So definitely going to see a lot of standing on the outside, landing leg kicks from both fighters. Because, I mean, Izzy in his own right against Paulo Costa basically just beat up his legs until, you know, he crumbled and then hit him over the top and then finished him. And then similar with Kelvin Gastelum, you know, a lot of leg kicks landed there. I mean, 21% of his significant strikes versus Gastelum were leg strikes. And Gastelum moves a lot more than Jared Cannonier does. Cannonier does not have the same movement as Kelvin Gastelum. And then you look at Paulo Costa, 47% of the significant strikes landed in that fight were leg kicks for Israel Adesanya against Paulo Costa. So obviously that's going to be a huge part of his game plan, going to weaken up that front leg, especially against a power puncher like Jared Cannonier. You get that front leg out of there, and he's pretty much got nothing else to offer from there. But, you know, where I think the difference is made is, you know, clearly in the speed advantage for Israel Adesanya. This guy is so fast with his hands. Cannonier really not known for his quickness. I mean, obviously, he's not slow. He's got power. But Izzy is just, there's levels, especially when it's a striking battle. We know it's a striking battle. Dan Hooker said it best. It's like Cannonier's a muscle-bound striker. Like, since when has that ever fared well against Israel Adesanya? It just really doesn't, especially when he doesn't have any high kicks to offer. It's everything down low or over-the-top punches. And, you know, one thing I did want to notice for Israel Adesanya was how remarkably low his volume is. You know, I was looking at the numbers, and I believe that only 2 times in his UFC career he's landed over 100 strikes in a fight, and he's fought a lot of 5-rounders. So I was actually pretty surprised by those numbers. And I think it just speaks to, you know, his precision, his, you know, how he manages his energy, his output, his cardio. And, you know, I think that we're just going to see Israel at his best. I think there's so many different ways he can end this one. Particularly, I think he's going to utilize a lot of feints. I think you can draw a lot of big reactions out of Jared Cannonier just with feints. I don't think he's going to need to throw much. I mean, we see, I mentioned this on the Spaces the other night. Jared Cannonier has some big reactions, especially when a right hand's coming down. The way he ducks his head down to the left, he really leaves himself, open to get hit with something, whether it be a leg kick, whether it be a left hook, whether it be an uppercut even. There's a lot of different ways that I think Israel Adesanya can get to Jared Cannonier here. And I just don't see this one going 5 rounds. In the off chance that Cannonier does win this fight, it's going to come by knockout. There's no other way he does it. It's easy to say. I mean, the other week we had the most, black and white example of this with Yuri Prochazka versus Glover Teixeira, right? We said Yuri's only path is knockout. Glover's only path is submission. And what do we get? A likely Glover decision that turned into a Yuri submission. So it's a lot easier for us to sit here on Thursday and say these things, but come Saturday night, it could be completely different. But I just don't see where Cannonier can really compete with Israel here. I think that Israel's movement is going to be too much for Cannonier. And, even touching back to his last fight, Cannonier, he lost that first round versus Derek Brunson very decisively across all the judges' scorecards. I believe he even got dropped in the first round. So, against someone like Brunson, you don't expect that kind of performance. Obviously, he won by knockout in the second round, but that was a very ugly first round. Maybe it had to do with the crowd and the nerves getting to him, but that's not going to go away in this fight. You're fighting for a belt for the first time against someone in Israel Adesanya, this is his life, fighting for belts and winning championships. So it's I really think it's a tailor-made matchup for Israel Adesanya here. And, if you're paying close attention with the Alex Pereira storyline here with Sean Strickland, they gave him I don't want to say a softball of a matchup, but a matchup that caters to his style and, his strengths. So I think they did the same thing here with Israel Adesanya. I mean, there's no denying Jared Cannonier, but I think the UFC was quick to make this knowing that they get a good performance out of Izzy.
And you say it best, man, because, at the end of the day, Cannonier does not have any wrestling upside, offensive wrestling upside whatsoever. And it's like you look at, some of the previous opponents that Izzy has faced, Robert Whittaker, Marvin Vettori, Jan Blachowicz. I mean, these guys are able to utilize that tool. Yeah. Whittaker and Vettori, I believe, took Izzy down 4 times.
Yep.
Jan took him down 3 times, of course, won that fight. And it's like, if you don't have to worry about that, I mean, it favors Izzy so much more, just given the physique of Izzy. I feel like he is technically there to be taken down by someone that is powerful and has that skill set. But Cannonier simply just doesn't have that, and you have to consider okay, Cannonier's really only path to victory here is to clock him and to finish him. I mean, I can't envision a world where Cannonier takes 3 rounds in this fight. Does he take a round or 2? Sure, maybe. But, no. I mean, to take 3 rounds versus Israel Adesanya, especially in a 5-round fight, it's no easy task. And, like you said, the way Izzy Adesanya is going to be able to feint, kind of get Cannonier thinking, maybe throw a lousy strike or a strike that is just completely off the mark where Izzy can capitalize on that. I mean, that's just such a real possibility here. And man, I love Izzy to make a splash here. He's got a lot of his teammates, around him on this for this fight. Of course, fighting on this card. And I love Izzy inside the distance, man. Cannonier just is not the guy. I love him. I think he brings a type of intensity that is hard to come by these days. And it's just Izzy's time, man. This is Izzy's time. We can go on a tangent of guys in this division that I think would give Izzy a tougher shot in this spot here. And Cannonier just kind of worked his way to this position. And it's going to be tough news when he finds out that there's levels to this shit. And, Izzy's just going to be that guy.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I think where it currently sits, the Izzy line for inside the distance is plus 140 or plus 130. For knockout or submission. I do want to say that I think there's a chance that we could get a standing guillotine for Izzy. I know that's a little bit out there, but I could definitely see it coming if he hurts Cannonier. Maybe his reflex is to shoot a double leg or something. And we've seen Izzy jump the guillotine before too, so it's not going to be anything new. Mm-hmm. And also if Cannonier does land the takedown, there's close to 0% shot that he keeps Izzy down, just because. The wrestling, like I said before, you can't learn it overnight, especially not at 38 years old. But, at plus 140 for inside the distance for Izzy, it's almost, to me, worth it to just take fight doesn't go the distance at minus 120. that line probably could creep down closer to even money, depending if people are taking this decision prop or fight goes a distance based on Izzy's last few fights. But, at the end of the day, crazy things can happen if Cannonier does happen to clip Izzy. You're getting that security blanket there at -120 opposed to +140. I mean, decent amount of juice. You got about 60, basis points of juice there that you're giving up, but you get that security of, securing your bottom line if Cannonier does land something big, because we have seen him land big shots against basically everybody. Even in the Kelvin Gastelum fight, 2 fights ago, the 5-rounder, he was beating the crap out of Gastelum. He hit him with some big punches, but you just can't knock Gastelum out. So we've seen Izzy get knocked out in pillow gloves, as they were calling it all week long, by Alex Pereira. So it's not out of the realm of possibilities for that to happen. So, personally, I think I'm more likely going to take that inside the distance prop over the Izzy finish. So, just want to throw that out there, that I think that there's a little more value on that side.
100%. And man, you're telling me the submission is live there. I mean, that line for an Izzy submission has to be over what, 12 plus 1200-ish or
plus 1600.
16. So yeah, hey, that could be the one, man. I mean,
round 3 submission. That's what's going to happen.
And it's just like, again, Izzy lives and breathes this stuff, man. And it's like, it wouldn't surprise me, man, because he's a mixed martial artist. Yeah, he can strike so crisply on the feet, but it's like he loves this, and if the opportunity is there, where I think Cannonier could be a liability if he's, on the mat, or just giving up a neck, I wonder how Cannonier would be able to defend that position. This is Izzy's time though, man. Let's see an Izzy finish inside the distance here. He doesn't have all the tremendous lights out knockouts on his record. Of course, he knocked out Costa and knocked out Whitaker, but man, I'd love to see a different type of performance that we've seen before from Izzy.
Yeah, he needs to add a highlight reel to his resume. I mean, other than the Rob Whitaker knockout, like the Costa one isn't like crazy impressive. It's not necessarily highlight reel material. So, he's looking to get a UFC strike moment, right? Get a new one that he can put on a chain.
Absolutely. Well, this card is just going to be an absolute banger, man. Every card is a banger, though. Like, it's always a banger. You know what I'm saying? But like the stardom of this card is off the charts. And yeah, I mean, we have so many prelims fight that I can't wait to get into on Saturday morning, man. We are going to have another big night. I feel it. I know it. And with the people that we got, bouncing ideas off each other, I know that we're going to prevail. So
absolutely. If you have a best bet on this main card here that you want to throw out, which one you're most confident in, I think people would love to hear that one. We'll put in the thumbnail, maybe we'll put in the description, but definitely throw it up on the screen.
Yeah, no, I mean, this what I'm about to say, it's pure value, man. It's the thought of the progression of both these fighters, the line that they're giving me here, and it's Volk either in round 3, 18-1, 4, 22-1, 5, 28-1. I mean, like, the more I say it, the more I really just don't understand what the bookmakers are thinking. Is it an algorithm where they just screwed up and it should be half? I mean, even if the 5-1, or excuse me, the round 5 prop was half of 28-1, say 14-1, I would still consider it. And you're giving me 28-1? Come on. I understand Holloway is durable. I get it. He's it's like he's not the Korean zombie, but he's the American zombie. Yeah, Volk is just so powerful. And you look at these last 2 fights, of course, going to decision. I don't think it's going to decision this time around. I mean, you're telling me in 10 fights, what percentage is this fight going, to decision? Let's say it's 80% of the time, right? Well, the first 2 fights went to a decision. So just an analytical perspective, I know it's a different time every time they fight, but still, you're a numbers guy. You got to consider it. And Volkanovski, round 3 through 5, I'm willing to sweat that first 10 minutes. That's my best, I think my best play of this entire card so far. The value is just so there. And I'm not putting a quarter unit on it. I'm putting a half a unit on it.
Wow. He's going deep.
I'm going deep. I'm going deep.
See, people, if you're watching this, that is conviction. So my man, believes in this. He's putting his money where his mouth is. And, you know, a big odds like that, he's going to keep building that plus 20 unit profit margin up and up and up.
You're giving me Alexander the Great at those odds. At that's just it still mind boggles me, man. Like, I know I keep saying it, but like the fact that they're giving us this number, it's just a huge mistake. And you know, if this does go to a decision, I'm willing to accept it. I'm willing to accept this defeat because I know that I took a great bet, because I know that it's going to be a close fight. I know that Holloway is going to get clipped and he's going to be damaged and compromised and all that. But like, you're giving me this wide of a line, I'm just not going to ignore it. Half unit on each round, 3, 4, 5. Let's roll. Let's rock and roll, baby.
I love it. I love the conviction too. My definitely my most confident bet on this main card. Hold on one sec.
Oh shit!
See those? That's going to be Robbie Lawler and Brian Barberena, fight not to go the distance, plus 130. I'm getting plus money on that. I would take it at minus 130 if they offered it. So getting plus money there. I love it. Both guys come to brawl. They come to swing. No real wrestling threat from either one going to be happening. I think a guy like Robbie Lawler at this point in his career, he just wants to come out, put on a show. Brian Barberena respects the hell out of his opponent. He's going to want to give the fans what they want. Obviously, wasn't a banger just a few months ago. Both guys have been finished. Both guys like to finish. So, you know, second fight on this main card, they're going to be following up Munoz versus O'Malley. I think there's going to be a lot of fireworks going on. And, you know, of all these 5 fights on the main card, this is the one I'm most confident in not to go the distance. And I get one of the better lines on it. So conviction play of the main card is that fight not to go the distance.
Have you seen that video of Robbie Lawler? He's getting interviewed. I think it was like a few years back. And it may have even been in relation to Conor McGregor, where, you know, the interviewer is asking him, you know, you want to take, you know, out of or take Conor's belt, or he was saying something. I'll have to re-pull up the interview. And Robbie Lawler just says this response where he's like, I'm not here to take anything else but his soul. Like, this man is born to be a fighter. And
it really is.
Whether he's 30, 40, 50, or 60, you're putting him in an octagon, he's going to go out there and be an absolute dog. Like he lives for this. And Barberena will be there to be hit. I'm right there with you. I think that an early finish is definitely live here. I mean, it's like 5-1 round 2, but if you're getting plus money for it to not go the distance, you're probably just safer to just take that number there. Love it. And, you know, cannot wait to cash in, man. This is going to be a fun card. Always ecstatic hanging with the boys in the Discord. And, gosh, it's like, we just go make it rain. We go make it rain. And, for the record, you know, when you have this big night, Mr. Matt Proto, you are coming out to Salt Lake City for UFC 278. We're going to see the GOAT Jose Aldo fight along with Kamaru Usman, but
yes,
that's for another day. And, I cannot wait, man. I cannot wait. We got a second pay-per-view this month, last week of July, last weekend. Just love this stuff, man.
Let's focus on this one now. Let's make some money on 276, and then we can think about 277. So, you know, guys, if you want to come hang out in the Discord, Knights of Dejan Discord, we're always in the Fight Night channel on Fight Night. So we'll put that link into the description so you guys click on it if you want to join us. Otherwise, we're going to be live Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern, right? Or 10 a.m.?
Well, we'll go whatever time the people want, but we've been going 11 a.m. Eastern time.
All right, so we'll decide on that, but it's either 10 or 11. If you want to find out for sure, you can just follow us on Twitter at Fight Night KOD, and obviously everything we post goes on there. The spaces, you know, come through. We'll be going over all the prelim fights, and you know, we'll be taking people up if they want to talk, give their thoughts, give their best bets, and hopefully we have a guy Dan on there as well. We'll go with a Knights of Dejan Fight Night parlay to end it off. As always, feeling good about this week. And Kev, thank you for all your insight. I hope you continue to build on those plus 20 units. You know, once you get to plus 20, it's a lot easier to get to plus 50. So let's hope this one builds up. And guys, thank you for joining us here at Fight Night. Thank you, KOD Media. Make sure you hit the follow and the like button. And you know what? Just subscribe too. Just get everything that we're putting out here, because we're going to give you winners consistently. And we have way more content going on than just Fight Night. So thank you guys for joining us, and we'll see you all on Saturday in the Twitter Spaces.